Hello, everyone. It's Lalita and Dr. Gary, Gary Gomes, I was going to say. I think we can call him Gary or Dr. Gary, right? You said that's okay? Oops, you're muted.
Either one is fine.
Wonderful. Okay, so welcome to Streamlab and the Gary Gomez YouTube channels. We are very excited because today's topic is one very fundamental topic for Vedic astrologers, a planet everybody loves,
Yep.
except a couple of signs, but most of them really love Venus. So Venus is the planet of this video, and why without Venus you cannot be happy on the Earth plane. And why Venus is also a very spiritual planet, and we need to learn how to use the energy of Venus and what Venus represents in our lives and how we can improve Venus with remedies and mantras, etc. And also mindsets, right?
Yep.
So it's all about us. This is an individual path. So it's your path and you need to make it perfect for yourself.
Yep.
So Venus, I'd like to say a few things before giving it to Dr. Gary. Venus is a very scholarly planet. So he's one of what we call Brahmin. He's a Brahmin, so he's a teacher. He's a Vedic teacher. And with Jupiter, he represents the two Brahminic teachers. So he is Shukracharya in Sanskrit, and he's a guru. So guru, remember, means ru, means remover, and gu is like a gooey stuff, darkness, confusion, stress, obstacles, and we want to remove this goo. So the guru can remove goo. Goo, so ignorance, darkness. And Venus represents all the pleasures on the earth plane. So what is Venus? Venus is beauty, elegance, arts, style, design, all the lovely things of life, a beautiful home, beautiful clothes, cleanliness, everything lovely, perfumes, women, a lot of beautiful things, right? Also beautiful cars. In other words, luxury. So anything beautiful and luxurious is usually associated with Venus. Sometimes other planets, but mostly Venus. So what I want to say about Venus, we need to remember that Venus, being a teacher, a guru, is very, very intelligent. He's a male. And he was, according to the Vedas, so Venus is the teacher of the Asuras. So Asuras means literally demon, but it's not only to be taken in that sense. So it means also what we all need on the material plane. So without enough food, enough clothing, enough a roof on our heads, and enough money, we cannot enjoy our lives unless we have chosen a different path, like an ascetic path, right? So unless you're a secluded yogi in the Himalaya, you need Venus to make it in this life. And it's also relationship. That's the most important thing to remember about Venus. He rules all kinds of relationships, but especially the spouse. And Venus represents the wife in a man's birth chart. So in the horoscope of a male, you have to look at Venus to see the conditions of his relationship with his wife and how his wife is, whether the wife is happy or not so happy, or whether there are obstacles or other issues with the wife, maybe some health issues, etc. So let's say that Venus, being Shukracharya, he was also the guru of Ravana. Ravana was a terrible demon. He was very intelligent and very scholarly, but he got carried away with his ego, right? And he was a very angry man, and he was always hurting people, and especially because of his, he wanted to dominate. His main interest was power. So, and Venus helped him He said, look, your bad period is starting. You better throw yourself at the feet of Vishnu. So look, Venus was intelligent. Or he said, this is how you can defeat Vishnu if you don't want to do that. So he gave him a choice. And he said, so remember the Vedic astrology gives you choices. So it really respects your free will. It's not an imposition at all. It's actually an empowerment. So Venus said to Ravana, you can do this, surrender to Vishnu and accept his supremacy, or because Rama, the person who was supposed to kill him, was an incarnation of Vishnu, or you can do something different. You can have this guy whose name is Marichi. He was not a bad man, but he was a yogi. He prayed to Shiva a lot. But he also had a wicked side. So he said, or have this guy kill him, kill Rama. So Ravana, being so egotistical, immediately chose the second path, the killing, the murder. And of course, he was destroyed in the process. Okay, so Vishnu always wins with the Asuras, eventually, right? And the other thing to remember, Venus was the son of a great Maharishi. So a great is redundant, but of a great Rishi, so of a Maharishi, Bhrigu. Okay, so Bhrigu was one of the greatest astrologers in the past, one of the greatest rishis who taught us about Vedic astrology. Why do you need to know that? Because his system is amazing. My guru, Dr. Pillai, says that there will never be another astrologer like Bhrigu. So he was the father of Shukracharya, and also he had a wife. So I want to say something about his wife. His wife was a good woman. She was a sage in her own right. However, she took her duty as a wife and as a host, right? Host, too seriously. I mean, too literally, not seriously. Those are serious things, but she took it literally. So she made a huge mistake. So when the Asuras and the Devas were battling, so the Asuras were traveling the Devas. This is all in the Ramayana, if you're interested reading it or find some other form that you prefer. So remember that the wife of Bhrigu was killed by Vishnu. So what does that teach us? I believe that this means that when a wife takes dharma a little too lightly and gives priority to other concerns like social life, tribes duties, tribes associations with others in a way that is not dharmic, she can lose her life. Okay, maybe it's not going to be that serious and that dramatic or dark. It can be just a loss of something, maybe honor, respect, etc. Right? Or money, a lot of money. So the wife of Bhrigu was alone at home, and the Asuras arrived after a battle with the Devas. They had turned some Devas into stone. So they did something bad, right? Mean-spirited. And so they won against the Devas temporarily, and they took refuge at Bhrigu's house. And first they asked, can you please hide us in your house? Because Vishnu is chasing us. He wants to kill us. And she said, yes, you're my guests, and Vishnu has no right to kill you or to come into my house. So Vishnu, being the supreme, the sustainer of the earth plane, had every right to tell her, actually, you're doing wrong. You should be neutral. You shouldn't do this. And so the wife of Bhrigu got very, very angry. Remember, she was the mother of Venus. And she got very angry with Vishnu and started to curse him and put a hand to do some spell to hurt Vishnu. And then Vishnu could only protect himself. He could not attack a woman. He was very righteous. And he said, and then you totally messed up this time. You're trying to kill me. And now I have the right to defend myself. And he killed her. Now, Bhrigu came home and found his wife dead. He was furious with Vishnu and cursed him. So that meant that Rama was born and then he had to suffer through his wife. All right. Having said that, that means that when we give priority to our pleasures, our community or our tribe, our family, and will ignore higher concerns like what is right, what is wrong. Should the devas, so righteousness on the earth plane, disappear because you love your family and your tribe or your, your race so much? We should be fair, right? So remember that Venus can bring a lot of happiness through, because it's really the karaka of happiness, the one that makes us happy relationship, all these joys and fun, and also the arts, going to the movies, watching movies, and theater, music, dance, etc. So all the lovely things. But when that gets out of control, then we risk big consequences. All right, so now I want to read one line from this Jataka Parijata, which is one classic of Vedic astrology. And it says, Venus has black curled hair. He's dark brown, so no white, remember. Venus is dark brown and handsome. His limbs are very symmetrical and gorgeous, like lovely. He has soft eyes and a very loving disposition. He wants to basically make love, right? He has much wind and phlegm. So he's Vata Kapha, according to Ayurveda, which means not too heavy, but also very mellow, very soft, very kind, like. And then he's endowed with rajas. So rajas, remember, is the guna of action, passion, all those things. So Venus is excellent at that. And Venus has grace and ease and vigor and all kinds of excellence. So we shouldn't underestimate Venus because it's a very important planet for our happiness and also for our spiritual path, because Venus is excellent. All right, now I want to hear from Gary. I'm going to mute myself. Hello, Gary. Go ahead.
All right. So thank you very much, Lalitha, for those stories about Venus. I also want to share some other stories from the Vedas and from various texts. According to the Brihaparashara Shastra, there are essentially 10 incarnations of Vishnu, 10 major incarnations of Vishnu through the planets. And the one connected with Venus is actually fairly violent and fairly strong, and that's Parashurama. Parashurama is essentially the son of Jamagdini, who's a great sage. He's a teacher for a tribe of Asuras, and some kshatriyas, essentially some rulers or some kings. Jamagdini had what was called a wish-fulfilling cow. He had a wish-fulfilling cow. So anybody who had this cow, their wishes would be granted pretty much automatically. And the kshatriyas, or the warrior caste, came up and said, please give us your cow. And he said, no. He said, I need it for my people. I need it for my family. And so when he didn't give it to them, they came and they killed him and they took the cow. Basically, what happened after that was Parashurama found out about this. Now, Parashurama was supposed to be unequaled in combat. Basically, nobody could beat him. As a matter of fact, there's an axiom in Vedic astrology, which I haven't found referenced in a classical text, but I found referenced by a lot of astrologers, is that only a god can beat Venus as a planet. And so you'll hear stories about Shiva having to swallow Venus in order to stop him. You'll hear stories about Rama, who's essentially the incarnation of the sun god, defeating Parashurama. But you won't hear anything about, let's say, a normal being, or any kind of even a demigod beating Venus in any contest. But Parashurama went out and he cleansed and purified the Kshatriya caste. I believe it was 3 times. He essentially wiped them out until there was a better class of warrior or ruler. So he was a Brahmin, but he was also.
And he spared Rama, though.
Yes,
and Lakshmana.
yeah,
He
yeah,
spared them.
yeah,
Yeah, he understood.
yeah, yeah. And I and part of that was because Rama had a bow that Parashurama himself couldn't bend, but Rama could. So in some ways, it's also a little bit of an analogy, and this is my own take on it. It's also a little bit of an analogy about Venus being the harbinger for the sun coming up. So Venus, so Parashurama occurs before Rama in the list of incarnations. So he's essentially the bright light that comes before the dawning of the sun, which is the life giver, the life giving planet. But basically, whenever you see a planet, so so that story, so a lot of people will go like, "Ooh, that's not Venus, that's not." But there's a very strong elements, but it does underscore the passionate side of Venus, and a lot of Western astrology use Venus as a significator of victory in combat. Okay, so yeah, that's actually a truism in Western astrology. So let's say if you have a battle between two parties, whoever has a stronger Venus usually wins. Because Venus is a bringer of peace, but to have a bringer of peace, you have to have a battle.
Do you mean in planetary war, Venus
Not,
always
not,
wins?
not necessarily just planetary war. Although there is a rule that in planetary war,
Venus wins.
Venus always wins planetary war, and that's actually based upon what I would call natural strength. You know, so the idea essentially Venus is technically the brightest planet, and it's the brightest planet by a lot. It's brighter than Jupiter is. And if you ever see it in the sky, it's about I say about 2 to 3 times the size of Jupiter when you actually tend to see it. And you'll also see phases in it. You'll also actually see little crescents in it. So because it has phases like the moon, that can indicate a person with Venus in the first house or Venus, a prominent Venus, can be a little bit moody or changeable. Okay, so like the moon, it has that same quality about it. But there are other stories about Venus. Venus essentially works both for so the purification theme in Venus is very strong. Is as a matter of fact, it sort of underscores a lot of what Venus stands for because there are stories about Venus learning what's called the Samjavini mantra, which is a mantra to bring the dead back to life after extensive penance, like apparently 1,000 years of penance, hanging upside down, just and self-sacrifice. There's also the story about Venus. So Venus essentially had one ability that Jupiter never learned, or he had to learn through his son, uh, and that story is connected um, with Jupiter. Uh, the war between the Asuras and the Devas was going on, and we mentioned this before. There was a war between the Asuras and the Devas going on, and once Shukracharya learned this particular mantra, he was able to bring the Asuras back to life. So the Devas would defeat the Asuras in battle, and then all of a sudden they'd hear them. Shukracharya would recite the mantra and would bring the warriors back to life, and the Devas would turn around and find a bunch of Asuras again, calling them back to battle, saying, "Can you fight?" Now it's interesting that Venus has that signification because it's not only connected with, to a certain extent, Venus is connected with allopathic medicines. Okay, so medicines which have to do with purifying and bringing stuff down to their essences. Homeopathic medicines are more holistic, more integral. But most Venusian medicines tend to be
very powerful too.
Very powerful too, yeah. And so it gets down to the pure essence of things. And also the essence of life is ojas or semen, and those are also ruled by Venus. So those are the carriers of life. So those are the carriers by which we get reborn. There's another story about Venus, and this actually has to do with Jamagdini as well, and it has to do with what some would consider to be a horrifying story connected with Shukracharya, and that is Jamagdani found his wife was actually washing some clothes or something like that in the stream, and she saw a young man, and she had like a moment of impure thoughts about the young man. And Jamagdani said, "I can't have this. My wife can't have impure thoughts." And he asked all his children. He said, "You must purify my wife. You have to kill her." And every son said, "No, I can't kill my mother. I can't kill my mother. I can't kill my mother." And he turned to Parashurama, and he said, "What is your command, father?" He said, "I want you to kill your mother and kill your brothers who disobeyed me." And he said, "Okay, fine," and just did it right away without a second thought. He said, "Okay, but now that you've done that, you can have whatever boon you want." He said, "Okay, bring them all back to life." So, so essentially, there's a very strong undercurrent of sacrifice connected with everything that Venus is connected with. As a matter of fact, there are assignations connected with the Vedas, or with the 6 darshans, excuse me. And Mars is Nyaya, Mercury is Vashishika, which is logic and discrimination. Moon is Shakya, Sun is Yoga. Purva which is the science of rituals, is Venus's domain. And Uttara or Vedanta is Jupiter's domain. So essentially, there's a very strong connection with the priests in India with Shukracharya, because essentially those are the individuals who know all the rituals, who know all the spells. Let's put it that way, for
a lot
invoking
of
the,
remedies, yes.
for invoking the gods. So yes, for contacting the gods, or the right procedure. And you'll often see mentioned in stories about Venus the idea that there's a right way to do things. So the story about Bali, which we discussed last week, Bali the demon king. Bali's really only his desire was to be king of the gods, so he could treat everybody well on earth. And there is a very strong facet of Venus's calling, or his portfolio, that is essentially makes him the domestic minister, as Mr. Rao called him. He's not the Secretary of State is Jupiter. The Secretary of the Interior, or the Secretary of Domestic Affairs, is Venus. And Venus's main function is
more
to keep
diplomatic.
yeah. So Jupiter will deal with the foreign countries, but Venus's role is to keep the people happy. And that was what Bali did. Bali was actually a very meritorious soul. He was a very good human, good being.
Literally, only became bad when he misunderstood his brother. Otherwise, he was a great king, right?
Yeah.
He became evil, and then
well,
Rama killed him, right? So
no, Rama didn't
we're
kill him.
talking about a different Bali.
We're talking about Bali, who was
He was a king.
he was a king, but he was the one who gave Vamana avatar 3 steps of
Prince
land.
of Savana. In the Ramayana, he dies, Bali, at the hand of Vishnu.
Well,
Rama.
yeah,
And,
but
yeah, so,
but
and Lakshmana was
but
also present, and yeah.
but in other
Yeah, and
stories,
there are so many. Yeah.
in other stories, he gives up his kingdom to give this dwarf three
Yes,
three
we,
three
we talk
three
about
three
Vamana.
you have 3 parcels of land.
Yeah.
And so his only desire, and he was so meritorious that essentially Vishnu promised him he would become Indra in the next cycle of creation. So Venus actually has, and there's a fascinating thing I found about Venus and that is, oftentimes you'll see people with strong Venuses answering not only the arts but also the sciences. So Albert Einstein had an exalted Venus. I remember there was one question years ago. We were asked by by the monks at the temple in Kauai about this chart, and the person was in the Mahadasha of Venus, and Venus was exalted in the chart, and I remember responding, well, this person is achieving very high academic ranks right now, and everybody was saying, oh, he's enjoying a lot of luxuries, he's enjoying a lot of fine foods, etc., etc. He was the youngest student.
Fame too.
Yeah, fame too. But he was the youngest student. This was his name to fame. He was the youngest student accepted to the University of Hawaii to study physics. That was his personal blessing. So Venus in the Brigu Sutram, the Brigu Sutram connects Venus with mathematics, not Mercury.
I either forgot that or I never knew.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
So essentially, as an astrologer, as the son of an astrologer, as the grandson of the first astrologer who learned astrology from the sun god, is saying from Ashura Maya learned it from the sun god, right? So essentially, he would have to be proficient in mathematics. He would have to understand mathematics.
Yeah.
Okay, so essentially, because the universe, all of our language in Vedic astrology is all the fancy words we use, all the Sanskrit words.
In mantras.
But they're numbers. Vimshotri is a number.
Calculations, yeah.
Yeah, Vimshotri is a number, and the Vamsha is 9 division. It's the 9th division. Dasamsha is the 10th division.
Yeah, we need to know those things.
Yeah, all these things are numerical representations.
Yes, and isn't that what I call sacred mathematics?
Yeah, sacred mathematics. So
numerology is really that. The Vedic. I'm talking about Vedic numerology. Sometimes I see other systems which I don't understand and I haven't studied. Like they attribute a 9 to a planet that is gentle. To me, that's wrong because it's Mars. But maybe there's another system that I have not researched. But in general, numbers pretty much represent a planet. So
exactly. So Dr. Raman has one system. Harish Johari has a slightly different system. So Dr. Raman tends to follow the days of the week. Harish Johari uses a system I like a little bit better, which gives assignations based upon certain traits of the planets. So 3 is Jupiter, 6 is Venus, 9 is Mars. Venus is 6. So essentially, you have all this numerological background, which is really connected with. And I also study tarot, and the tarot and the numerology of the tarot works very well with Vedic astrology. It doesn't work so well with Western numerology, but with Vedic numerology, it works like that.
Okay, I didn't know.
Okay, but basically, whenever you get down to these elements, there's always an element, number 1, of. So Venus is a Brahmin, but there's always a trade-off with Venus. There's always, love, money. Sometimes you bring them together, sometimes you don't.
You're right. It's transactional love. You give me this, I'll give you this. I make you happy, you make me happy. And you make me happy if I make you happy, and vice versa. If you make me happy, I'll make you happy.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much a trade.
So essentially, it's not. So it's said that people with strong Venuses know the value of things. And that is meant literally. I mean, so they'll know the value of an item. They'll know the value of, let's say, a spiritual discipline. They'll know there are 2 things that people with strong Venuses usually have to avoid. The first is intoxicants. Okay.
That's a
all right, because Shukracharya made one of his biggest mistakes by drinking wine, and he essentially ended up drinking the ashes of Jupiter's son. He essentially was begged to bring him back to life by Devyani, his daughter, and he had to teach. And he had to teach, and so the Asuras didn't like Jupiter's son hanging around. They freaked put the ashes in his wine. Shukra drank the wine, and Devyani, who is Shukra's daughter, came running around, which means the way of the god, the pathway of the gods, by the way. Devyani is the name. And he heard Jupiter's son calling from his stomach, asking to be reborn. So he had to. So in order for him to reborn, he would come out of Shukracharya, and Shukracharya would die. So he had to teach him the mantra. So he cursed alcohol for essentially, and he cursed alcohol for all people coming forward just because it made him do something he didn't want to do. He gave the Ashura's most powerful secret. The second thing that is also really important for people with strong Venuses is not to get too centralized. And usually that doesn't happen, to be honest. If Venus is...
I think you're right. I think when the Venus is strong, there's no excess in that sense. They're not particularly obsessed. Because obsession comes from other planets, right? Like the presence of Mars or Rahu,
or even Moon, or even Moon.
Even the Moon, yes. They're not happy together, no. They do help each other sometimes in a aspect, but not so much together, I see. So I agree with you 100%.
Yes. So oftentimes you'll see people who are like excessively greedy, or who like overcompensate, the way we were talking about debilitated planets before. They'll overcompensate with material possessions. So you'll see people with a debilitated Venus wanting a lot of obsessed with sex or obsessed with material
exactly.
possessions.
And sometimes the association, not always, but sometimes associations of Saturn can cause some excesses and some even deviance.
So Shukracharya is essentially it's a good planet. There is an element of sacrifice connected to it. It is protective. It's not as protective as Jupiter. Jupiter can ward off 1,000 illnesses. Shukracharya can ward off 100 illnesses based upon it, but it's still a protective planet. And basically, depending on its placement, it can make a person very nice, very humble. Also, I want to add just personally, for those of you who ever played a musical instrument or done art or done anything connected with artistry, there's a great deal of math involved in all those systems. And
with the notes, right?
And but that's right, with the notes, also with time. Keeping a beat.
Tempo.
Also, even with the frequency of the notes, right?
I'm not an expert in music, but I dance. I've danced, I've taken classes my whole life. So 30 years plus of dance classes. And the tempo, it's all counting. It's all math, right?
So it all reflects back to numerology and counting. So Venus has that natural instinct connected with those. Jupiter understands those elements as well. The only knowledge Jupiter didn't possess that Venus possessed was the knowledge of the Samajavini mantra, and he eventually got it.
That's huge. Reviving the warriors is big,
but basically, and also they actually started off, at least according to what I've read, they started off with the same teacher, but Shukracharya just knew that because of his ancestry, he would never become the guru of the Devas. That was essentially Jupiter's lineage. So that was why he went off and became the teacher of the Asuras. If you're destined to be a teacher and there's only one job open, you go for that one job. So that was his job. If there are two jobs and one's taken, you go with the other camp.
He did a good job anyway. So he did a good job.
And a friend of mine, Nalini Kanta, Das, who you may know, he's a very well-known Vedic astrologer. Nalini has said, none of us are devas, and none of us on this earth plane are devas. So he says, so Shukracharya is really here to help us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good point.
yeah,
I like that point of view very much.
yeah,
May I say one thing?
sure,
That yes, so Venus is so bright, right? Is so alive in our consciousness on the
yeah,
earth plane. So
yeah,
when we're in the physical body, Venus reigns supreme because we need Venus. Otherwise, we become depressed.
yeah,
So that's also what my guru says. So you need Venus, absolutely. You cannot just dismiss and
yeah,
say, oh no, I will be on a path of renunciation, because even if you do, you still worship the goddess. So
yeah,
the goddess is associated with Friday, for example,
yeah,
and we honor the goddesses, especially in the Tamil Siddha tradition, which is the one I'm
yeah,
following primarily. And on Friday, you really worship, and of course, the full moon, so the moon too.
sure,
You have to use those mantras on a Friday or on a Monday,
yeah,
particularly, right? Other days too, but particularly those 2 days. So look, our Venus is fundamental, and I was thinking about also about the birth chart you mentioned about Einstein, right? So Einstein's uh, Mercury was debilitated,
yeah,
but there was
yeah,
a Nichabanga, so a
yeah,
reversal of that, a
yeah,
cancellation of that weakness of Mercury, because Venus was strong. And it was so Mercury was associated with an exalted planet. So not only was he bright, but he was very intuitive. All
yeah,
this knowledge came to him because they were all in Pisces, these planets, right? Several planets. And he was extremely intuitive. He even said, I don't have enough math to
yeah,
explain this,
yeah,
but it came to me. Look, and he was very gracious. He loved women too, I think.
yeah, yeah.
So
I,
anyway,
I think one of the most fascinating things for me is, especially when we talk about Einstein's chart, is his Mercury Mahadasha was just horrible. They thought he was slow in school, that that he might never make
yeah,
it.
exactly.
And so the sequence goes Mercury, then K2 Mahadasha, then Venus Mahadasha. Most of his significant discoveries were made and published during his Venus Mahadasha. And as a matter of fact, one of his most significant discoveries about the bending of light around the Earth, essentially, that was discovered using Venus as a reference point planet.
Yeah, and
So,
it's a very devotional Venus. And
yeah,
so he did not dismiss God. I mean, it was not his primary job to talk about godly things, but he
yep,
was not, too much of a skeptic.
yep,
I remember one conversation he had, I think, with Krishnamurti, I think.
yep,
No, no, sorry, with Vivekananda,
yeah.
Swami Vivekananda. Did he?
So
Was he the one who
I,
had a
I
conversation?
don't know. I don't know. But
I'm pretty sure, but I'm not 100, I could be wrong. But I think talking to Vivekananda, he didn't mind that path. He understood the Vedic path, but it was not his. My guru revealed that he was actually a great Siddha in a
yeah,
previous life. He was Bogar Mahasiddha, right? A great Siddha
yeah,
master. And he came back to understand the material aspect of the spiritual. So
yep,
there's spiritual science and material science. So they really are complementary. They
yeah,
complement each other. And it's not exclusive. So look, the material path
sure,
is excellent with Venus, and Jupiter is the teacher of the devas. So the spiritual path can be excellent, right?
sure,
Ideally, there's both. We have both, and yeah. So although Jupiter is much larger, look, Venus takes a lot of space in our consciousness because of the
yep,
uh, closer light to us, we see it, it's bright, it takes over our
yep,
consciousness. And we need to be cautious, of course, as
yep.
Venus.
I think one more important thing about Venus is, if we understand if we understand the spiritual, the material world a little bit better, it actually helps us in our understanding of the spiritual world, because essentially they're reflections of each other. They're not isolated from each other. Essentially, we as human beings with limited shells containing us, so this body is limited. Is Am I this body in reality? Not really. This is just a form I've assumed for this particular lifetime. And well, sometimes I'm happy with it. Sometimes I wonder why the hell I picked this particular form. But at the same time, it's also one of the pathways to understanding, okay, these are the limitations of materialism, but also spirituality has certain barriers to it because we don't understand it. And ultimately, there's a union between the two. Ultimately, the spiritual world is the material world, and vice versa. So essentially, if you're seeing bad conditions existing in the world, that's a temporary manifestation of the spiritual world in the current state. But the
Yes.
spirit,
So
but the
they are
spirit,
complementary, you're saying.
yep, yep, yep,
And one thing that I see about Jupiter doesn't hurt Venus. So spirituality doesn't hurt your material path.
yep,
You can have all the beautiful, luxurious cars you want. And Jupiter, the planet that is more spiritual, more for space and wisdom, does not hurt the path.
yep.
It's the other way around. When you're too concentrated on the material and forgetting God, you can get really seriously lost.
Well,
And that's what I see over and over again.
well,
One funny thing about Venus, and then and then I'm done. I don't have anything new. But the funny thing I heard that from Dr. Pillai, my guru, who is a company of Siddha medicine and products, empowered by mantras as well. He said that a lot of guys from pharmaceutical companies are looking for the Sanjivani in India because they know it's a plant that the Siddhas knew very well.
yep,
And Venus, of course, rules that is the master of that herb and would give it to the Asuras to revive them, right? So the demons would come back and battle all over again with the Devas. So these guys from the pharmaceuticals want the Sanjivani. Because they want, defeat death. Yeah.
well,
Kind of cool, I thought.
I, I just want to have one small disagreement with you, and it's a really minor one.
Yeah, please.
But
I'm open to discussion.
but but basically, there's an axiom that the moon views no planet as an enemy, and no planet views Jupiter as an enemy. Okay, so Venus has no animosity towards Jupiter. However, Jupiter does dislike one planet, and that is Venus. In
So you think it's the other way around? Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I like to know. Wow, yeah.
and
Did you see it in birth charts working that way?
yeah, actually, I have, because if you're looking at, so Mr. Rao had done a study of Venus Jupiter subperiods, and usually, unfortunately, during Jupiter Venus subperiods, there's usually a significant death that occurs in a family.
It can happen, yeah.
And Venus Jupiter, the same thing. So
I see why you're saying that. I kind of agree.
Yeah.
Not 100%, but I definitely see the value of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because think about Venus in Pisces. Yes, it's exalted, it's devotional, it brings wealth, but it brings sometimes relationship problems.
Yep.
It brings too much idealism in relationship that the person is forced to choose a higher path of devotion to the divine or to some higher, right? The same in Sagittarius.
Yeah.
There can be trouble in relationship. Yeah.
Now that relationship exists purely from a set of mathematical calculations that are done in determining permanent friendships and relationships, which we're not going to get into here. So essentially, it's what I would call a mathematical animosity, not a personal animosity between the two planets. But it does make sense that the guru of the Devas wouldn't necessarily like the guru of the opposing camp. Venus doesn't dislike Jupiter, and it's not because he's a sucker, it's because he understands Jupiter's role, you know, and Jupiter
But
understands.
we did have a
Yeah,
fight.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
want
yeah,
to talk about this fight when you're done. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So essentially, this is essentially a purely mathematical relationship between, you know, that no planet views Jupiter as an enemy, and the moon views no planet as an enemy. It's a purely mathematical relationship based upon where planets lie from the Mula Trachona sign of the planet itself, and that's all it's based on, literally. You know,
Yeah, I like that point of view. I hadn't thought so much about it, but it makes so much sense. Yeah, I like it.
yes, yeah. So as a rule, but again, I think if we personalize it, we're losing fact that this is essentially because of the math involved, not necessarily Jupiter
It's
saying.
always both, right?
Jupiter
It's
saying,
always both. It's
see,
both. Both.
I can't stand that darn Venus. He rubs me the wrong way. It's not like that at all.
Where is your Venus?
First house.
First house.
First house, yeah.
Oh, in Gemini?
No, I'm a Libra.
Oh, Libra. Oh,
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Awesome Venus.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why it's so pleasant talking to you.
Yes. So it's, well, well, somebody was trying to figure out, this was years ago, and this sounds a little bit too much like ego praising, but it was really, the letdown was actually palpable. And an astrologer came up to me and said, I was just trying to find out why you're so darn likable. You know, he just came up to me at an astrology conference, and I didn't know the guy really well. I'm like, is he putting me on or something like that? And he looked at my chart and he went, "Oh, you got Venus in the first house. That's why." And he was so disappointed. He was looking for some exotic
Like,
combination in
okay,
my chart.
he's better.
He was looking for somebody. He was looking for somebody. He was this lovely guy. He's passed away now,
So
but he's a lovely person.
yeah.
But he was just looking at me and trying to figure that out. And I'm not saying I'm lovable to everybody. I'm just saying he found me personally likable.
Yeah, I think
But
true scholars, they appreciate each other so much. They don't compete. They don't fight. If you're a real researcher and you're serious with Vedic
yeah,
astrology, there's no arguments.
yeah,
Maybe you don't like the form in which it's expressed, but you cannot
sure,
really attack that person.
sure,
It's not fair. So Venus teaches you that to have good manners, right?
yep,
Behave
yeah.
yourself as your parents told you when you were little. I
Good.
like to mention a quick story that I found in Dr. Svoboda's book.
Oh yes,
And it's a great book, and it's called The Greatness of Saturn. But
oh
the
yeah,
beauty about not about only about Saturn. There are great stories about each planet, and
yeah,
I love the story about Jupiter and Venus. So Venus went on vacation for 7 years. That shows Venus, right?
yeah,
Venus rules vacations.
yeah,
Air travel, just have fun, enjoy. Okay, so Venus took off for 7 years, and Jupiter took over because Venus was the teacher of the Asuras.
yeah,
So Jupiter, behind Venus' back, went to the Asuras and started teaching them all these higher paths, this wisdom, the sacred scriptures, the Vedas. And the Asuras became very good. They became very righteous and dharmic. So Venus came back after 7 years and was furious. Remember, Venus rules the seventh house, right?
yeah,
Other tribes. Remember
yeah,
the wife of Brigo who died because she was bad. But anyway, no, she was good, but she did one boo-boo. And then, so Venus got very angry with Jupiter and started to reteach everything from scratch to the Asuras and said, no, you cannot do this. We have to teach you all over again.
I mean, he may have edited the book since I read it, because it's essentially he was teaching the Asuras how to lose to the Devas, which were, that was the version I remember.
Yeah.
But but I think essentially all these stories have some kind of a theme to them, in that Shukra as I won't say as much, has similar knowledge to Jupiter. They both have similar knowledge. They both have similar skill sets,
Yeah.
but they have different portfolios. They have different missions, and
Yeah, they're all different things, and we need a little bit of everything. I
right,
believe in
right,
modern times we cannot live on the street, right?
right.
That's bad. So definitely you need wealth, you need some
Yep,
kind of support
yep,
financially,
yep,
and that's ruled by Venus too. Not only Jupiter, both of them teach, okay, have a good life, and
yep,
then you can do other things,
yep.
right?
And the politeness comes from both planets.
Say that again.
The politeness comes from both planets.
Yeah. Oh,
Both
yes, yes.
planet.
So
Yeah,
aviation is also Jupiter, exactly.
yep.
Mhm.
So
Local pilots have dominant planets in Pisces or Sagittarius. Yeah, I've seen that.
yeah.
Mm.
Okay. All right.
This was lovely. Thank you
All
so
right. Thank
much.
you very
I
much.
enjoyed
Thank you
it.
very much, Lalitha.
See you very soon. Take care.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching.
Bye-bye,
Remember to
everyone.
subscribe and like this video, so that helps the algorithm so you don't miss any videos.
Yeah, and
Take
share,
care.
please.
And share. Absolutely. Take
Okay.
care.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.